Hello folks, another mind-boggling game by Hikaru Nakamura, who managed to produce the only decisive outcome today. He was playing the former world champion Vasilin Topalov with the black pieces, and the opening was already very interesting from psychological point of view because Hikaru Nakamura chose the move c6, very rare in his practice, even though he has played it in 2015. But what's more interesting is that Topalov has played it the last time in 2013, and I guess Nakamura's idea was to take him out of the book as quick as possible and to force him to play a completely different position from the one that he probably prepared. I guess Topalov was ready for some Berlin or for some Sicilian defense, but Nakamura chose a line which he has never played before. In the advanced Caracan, he chose the move c5, and interestingly enough, none of them has ever played this in their lives, at least according to the Megabase. Anyway, so Topalov took on c5, and after knight c6, knight f3, and bishop g4, he chose the second main move in the situation. This is the move c3. Bishop b5 is more common instead of that. When after e6 and b4, he intends to keep the pawn, Nakamura reacted with the move a6, stopping any b5 ideas. By the way, b5 is an idea which will happen in case of knight e5. This is a common trap. Be aware not to get into this one, because here after the check on e4, knight c6 and b5, the bishop on g4 is hanging and the knight on c6 is hanging and black is dropping a piece. Players at this level obviously know these traps, and he played a6, knight e2, knight takes e5, also the best move. He needs to take the pawn immediately, otherwise he risks to be down a pawn. And after queen a4, Nakamura produced a novelty. He dropped the knight back on d7. Most of the players, actually there are two games that have been played in this situation, have continued with queen d7 when the endgame is approximately equal. But obviously Nakamura is trying to play for the win in every single game, desperately trying to catch up with Wesley So and winning the tournament outright. On knight e7, Topalov reacted well with knight e5, but after knight f6, I think that instead of the move that he played in the game c4, and which looks a little bit over-aggressive, he should have gone for knight g4, and after knight g4, bishop e2, knight f6, bishop b2. I think this is probably a little bit better for him, and on the long run, he can try and make very good use of his bishop pair. But instead of that, he played over-aggressively, and as you can see, he is not yet prepared for that. His pieces are not into the game. Nakamura reacted very well with the move a5. He's attacking the pawns on b4 and the one on c5, and most importantly, he's attacking the queen. The queen cannot leave this diagonal as the knight on e5 will be hanging. And that's why somehow awkwardly he had to go for knight b3, ab4, queen b5, and bishop b7. Black is increasing the advantage in the development that he has, so Topalov had to play some only moves to keep the balance and to try to win some tempos to get back into the game. After queen c7, he played f3, and on bishop f5, knight e7. This was obviously foreseen by Nakamura. He played rook b8. And now comes quite a shocking move. Topalov sacrifices the queen. And it's wow, what's going on? Why is he sacrificing the queen? But the thing is that if he doesn't, he would be simply much worse. In case of queen a5, there is queen e5 check, king f2, king e7. Black is going to be up a pawn. He's going to bring the rook out, and he's going to have stable advantage for nothing. When they move knight f5, Topalov makes the game very irrational, and as we are going to see, Black had better continuations than the ones that he had in the game. After knight g7 check, first of all, besides the move king e7, king f8 is interesting, but you can check the analysis in the news section if you want. We don't have that much time to see all the lines here, even though they are very interesting. Now Topalov took on b5, and technically speaking, white is doing very well. He has rook and two bishops for the queen. The problem is that his knight on g7 is already almost trapped, and he also has problems with the king. So Nakamura goes for counterattack himself, knight c5, but objectively speaking, instead of knight c5, the preliminary queen e5 was better. And only after king d1, then knight c5. Give me the knight and give me the rook. And this would have given him strong initiative. After rook b1, knight e4 looks very interesting and very strong. Preparing the forks on f2 and on c3, and after the capture, knight e4, I have the feeling that black has very serious initiative and very strong attack. You can check this for yourselves. But back to the game. Knight c5 played. Topalov managed to put the bishop on b2. That's a very important move. He's defending the king and he finishes the development. Knight takes b3, a b3, queen f4. Nakamura is going for the attack. White has no time to escape with the knight on h5, because after knight h5 there is queen e3 check, and on bishop e2, knight h5 and knight f4, and black is checkmating. After rook e2 there will be knight to d3 check, and checkmate either on c1 or on f2 depending on where the king goes. So Topalov played bishop e2. Unluckily for him, this is very inaccurate. He should have given a check on a7 instead, keeping this king in the middle of the board and not letting this rook out. But this wasn't the major mistake that he did. The major mistake he committed after rook c8, rook d1, queen g5, when instead of castling, when a chance was given, he played the move b6. Castling was mandatory. The king should have gone somewhere safe on the g1 square. Right now, Topalov is saving the knight thanks to this pawn, but black is getting very, very active, and he manages to keep the king in the middle of the board, and because of that the rook is also suffering, and because of all these things, white's position is probably just lost. In fact, here after queen to e3, the checkmate threat is there. Knight g3 was a possibility, but it wouldn't change anything. It will lead to the same position. Queen takes e3 was played. Queen takes b6 was played, but instead Nakamura was already winning with the move d4. And in case of b7, he would have just gone d3. And even though white is promoting to a queen, black is delivering checkmate after the capture on e2, followed by queen e2 and queen g2. Nakamura played in the coming time trouble quite practically, actually. He took on b6, then he came back on e3, and then he took the pawn on b3 as well. So he has now a queen and a bunch of pawns for the rook and the two light pieces. Technically speaking, once again, white should be okay, but while he's trying to finish the development and to bring the king out and the rook out, he is going to lose more material here. Concretely, after king f8, e5 wasn't bad neither, followed by queen to b2. e5 is inevitable, and white lost a piece. He lost this poor knight. At the end of the day, he spent so much time and efforts to save it, but it got surrounded anyway. When he took on d5, he got there was a double attack, and the knight was gone. And after that, Nakamura managed to convert the advantage in a very, very good style, very good way. First of all, he activated all his pieces, and then the queen was exceptionally powerful, especially when he opened the road for it with the move e4. Now, Topalov came back with the rook on b3, trying to defend his position, but it was impossible. Queen e6, again, there were double attacks all over the place. Give me the rook, give me the pawn on f3, give me the bishop on e2, give me the rook on e1. Too many things for him to handle, and he couldn't survive this. The queen got in, took the pawn on h2, with checks on the top of that, and black dragged the king out to finally chase it all over the place with rook f6, followed by queen h1 check and queen b1 check. The king has no defenders, and Topalov had to resign after the move rook c6. This was the only decisive game today. Now Nakamura is trailing Wesley So by half a point.